crowd gathers in the marketplace, whispering as a young girl steps onto the auction block. Ankles are bruised from the chains, and her eyes search for mercy she will never find. Men inspect her like merchandise, deciding where she will be sent. She may scrub filth, serve wealthy elites, entertain drunken crowds, or be dragged into horrors she cannot imagine. And what happens next is even more shocking than what you are seeing now. The Roman slave system. To understand what awaited young female slaves, you first need to understand the world that created them. In the Roman Empire, slavery was not a hidden crime. It was the foundation of daily life. Every street, every villa, every farm, and every palace depended on the labor of people who had no freedom at all. Many girls were captured during wars and dragged across continents. Others were born into slavery, their fate sealed before they took their first breath. Some were sold by desperate families who needed money to survive. No matter how they arrived, the moment they became slaves, the law saw them as property. They could be bought, sold, punished, or killed without consequence. A slave girl had no legal rights, no protection, and no control over her future. Her value depended entirely on what job her owner believed she could perform. Some were placed in wealthy homes, others were forced into hard labor, and many faced far darker uses that stretched beyond cruelty. Inside this vast system, young girls suffered the most. They were small, powerless, and easy to exploit. Their lives were shaped by fear, and each day brought a new form of survival. Domestic terror, household servants. For many young girls, their first destination was a wealthy Roman home. At first glance, it might seem like the safest place to end up, but inside these grand villas lurked a different kind of terror. A household slave lived under constant watch. Every mistake, every pause, every sign of exhaustion could bring punishment. Girls woke before sunrise to clean courtyards, scrub marble floors, wash laundry by hand, and carry heavy water jugs from distant fountains. They polished silver, tended fires, and prepared meals, all while standing silently in the background. They were trained to keep their eyes lowered and their emotions hidden. The greatest fear came not from the work, but from the people inside the home. The mistress might snap under stress and strike without warning. The master could demand anything he wanted, and no one would defend a slave girl who refused. Even the children of the household could cause trouble. A single lie from a wealthy child could mean severe punishment for a young servant. There was no escape. Every room she entered reminded her she did not belong. Behind the elegant walls lived a world where obedience was survival, and silence was the only protection she had. Nursing and motherhood roles. Some girls were chosen for a role that seemed gentle on the surface, yet carried its own kind of heartbreak. They were forced to become caretakers for the children of wealthy Roman families. These young slaves fed infants, rocked them to sleep, and carried them through long nights when sickness struck. They were expected to show tenderness, even though no one showed it to them. In some households, girls were forced to work as wet nurses. This meant they were required to nurse another woman's baby, even if it meant being separated from their own child or losing the chance to have one at all. Their bodies were used to keep another family strong and healthy. The emotional toll was immense. A slave girl could love a child she raised, but she could never claim that child as her own. When the family traveled, the child might be taken away without warning. She had to return to her duties and swallow the pain quietly. It was motherhood without recognition and affection without freedom. Entertainment, acting, and infamia professions. For some young girls, their fate was far more public. Instead of working inside a home, they were forced into entertainment or performance. At first, it might seem glamorous, but in Rome, Performers were branded with a social stain called infamia. This meant their honor was considered worthless, and they were treated as objects of amusement rather than human beings. Girls were trained to dance, sing, or act on crowded stages. The performances were demanding and often dangerous. They wore costumes chosen for them, sometimes designed to humiliate rather than impress. If they made a mistake or displeased the crowd, the consequences were immediate. Jeers, objects thrown at them, and beatings behind the scenes were common. Some were forced into mock battles in small arenas where they fought with wooden weapons to entertain drunken audiences. Others were made to perform in private gatherings where wealthy men expected more than simple entertainment. Every night brought uncertainty. The applause of the crowd did not mean freedom or safety. It only meant she had survived another performance. Behind the music and the cheering, her life was a fragile act that could collapse at any moment. Sexual slavery and prostitution. For many young female slaves, the darkest path was the one no girl should ever face. Some were sent directly to brothels the moment they reached puberty. Others were forced into sexual service inside private homes. In Rome, a slave girl's body belonged entirely to her owner. She had no right to refuse and no law to protect her. Brothels were crowded, filthy, and brutal. Girls worked long hours with no rest, serving men who saw them as nothing more than property. They slept on straw, and many became sick or injured. If they cried, no one listened. If they tried to run, punishment was swift and cruel. Owners viewed them as investments, and they were expected to earn back the money spent to buy them. Even outside the brothels, life offered no safety. Wealthy men often kept slave girls for their own pleasure. Some girls were forced to attend private feasts where guests demanded entertainment that crossed far past music or dance. A slave girl who resisted could be beaten or sold to an even harsher owner. What made this reality even more terrifying was its normality. Roman society accepted this cruelty as part of daily life. No one questioned it, and no one protected the girls who suffered in silence. For these young slaves, survival meant enduring the unendurable night after night. Religious and ritual servitude. Some young girls were forced into roles that looked sacred but were built on fear. In certain temples, slave girls worked as attendants, cleaning altars, preparing offerings, and serving priests. These tasks demanded obedience and purity, yet the girls were given no dignity in return. Others were made to participate in rituals they barely understood. They carried torches during ceremonies, assisted in sacrifices, or acted as symbolic figures meant to represent purity or submission. Any mistake could anger the priests, and punishment followed quickly. For these girls, religion offered no comfort. Their labor was not devotion. It was captivity disguised as holiness, leaving them trapped between spiritual demands and the harsh reality of being owned. Young girls in hard labor. Not all young female slaves worked in homes or temples. Many were sent to the fields, workshops, or public baths where the labor was harsh and endless. Small hands were put to work harvesting crops under the burning sun, grinding grain until their arms shook, or tending fires in steaming bathhouses. Some worked in crowded textile workshops, spinning wool for hours with no pause. These girls were chosen for hard labor because they were young and could be pushed past exhaustion. Their bodies ached every night, but rest was never guaranteed. Hard labor stole their strength long before adulthood arrived. Long-term impact on their lives. The suffering of these young girls did not end when their workday was over. The trauma they carried stayed with them for life. Years of beatings, Humiliation and exhaustion left lasting scars on their bodies and minds. Many never learned to speak freely because silence had been their only protection. Even those who were eventually freed faced harsh judgment from society. A former slave girl could not easily find a husband, own property, or escape the shadow of her past. People saw her as marked, stained by the work she had been forced to do. Freedom brought survival, but it rarely brought healing. The Roman world never forgot a slave's origins, and neither could she. Conclusion: return to the marketplace where the young girl stood on the auction block. Her fate could have led her into any of the horrors you have just witnessed. She might have scrubbed floors in a wealthy home, raised children who were not her own, performed for crowds that mocked her, or been forced into the darkest corners of Roman society. Her life was shaped by choices she never made and by a system that denied her humanity from the start. The greatness of Rome was built on the suffering of thousands of girls just like her. Their stories were buried beneath marble statues, and grand victories' voices still echo through history. Remember them is to uncover the truth. It is to see Rome not only for its glory, but for its cruelty.